Hey, it's Paul. Before we get started, we need to make sure that you, the listener, knows that we are not mental health professionals and not qualified to prescribe therapies or therapeutic advice. We are also not your gurus and have no aspirations in that direction. We are simply two people who are trying to feel better and do better in our lives, just like you. And now, on with the show.
What's up, Chief Keith?
What's up, Bread Zeppelin?
Did you say Bread Zeppelin?
I said Bread Zeppelin, yeah.
I love bread. It's so fitting. And I also love Led Zeppelin.
There you go. It just
Great.
works. It just works. Hey, I'm calling about the podcast. What do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I
first,
have an idea.
wait. Before you have your idea, look at this, man. Look at my face today. Look at my eyes, man. When did this happen? When did these smile lines
What?
But these crow feet. Look at the crow feet. Look at my forehead.
Got it.
Like
Dude,
I could put Matchbox
no.
cars in the lines on my forehead.
No, the frownies.
Yeah.
No, you earned those by laughing
I did.
so many years.
You're right.
So embrace that shit.
Yeah.
You would look weird if your face was frozen.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
embrace it.
What was your idea? Sorry.
It's funny you should say that. It's about the beauty ideal. The beauty duty.
Okay.
I said beauty.
The
Yeah.
beauty duty. I like
The
it.
beauty duty. Let's
Okay.
talk about it. I think it's pretty detrimental to buy all into it. So
Yeah,
most
yeah,
people don't know
for
what they're
sure.
buying into. And
Interesting.
buying they are.
Yeah, they are buying, and it's creeping into men's culture too. So this is a really timely thing to talk about. I'm into it.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, go embrace those crow's feet, and I'll go high five my cellulite.
I'm
And
gonna go-
we'll get together in the studio.
Preparation H my face, and I'll see you then.
All right. Later on, dude.
Bye.
Bye.
We all want to look good, to appear attractive and powerful to our friends, family, and potential mates. Yet what that means has changed dramatically over the years.
Today on the show, we're talking about beauty standards. Where have they come from, and what we do when we unconsciously or consciously conform to them.
From cosmetic surgery to skin whitening to extreme diets and exercise, one thing is for sure. We have an image problem and it's not getting any better. But what happens when we consciously take our gaze away from that world of perfection and begin to set our own standards? Well, today that's what we're endeavoring to find out. So if you're ready for takeoff,
Let's go. Hello, Nora.
what's up, Paul? How you doing?
Good,
I'm Nora
good.
McMahon.
I'm Paul Overton.
This
and
is-
this is
If we only knew then. Go on.
podcast
Of hard
earned.
wisdom.
There we go. We'll get it done one way or the other. I like the way we did that.
You
Hard
tell me never
earned
know how we're
wisdom.
going to enter
No.
into the podcast. So
No,
it's like,
we don't plan it. Oddly enough, I bet you couldn't notice. But there you go.
Nailed
All
it.
right, let's get
Crushed
down to
it.
business. What are we
All right.
talking about today, Nora?
We're talking about beauty standards, and I want to be
Mm.
say more specifically Western beauty standards.
Yeah.
And just kind of the head case and history and complete nuttery it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And-
yeah.
Paul and I have been around long enough now to see the shifts in ideal body types and all that stuff, especially being people who knew what it was like before the internet and social media, and
Yes.
now
Yeah.
the insanity.
Yeah.
So we're just going to kind of touch on some points about this because I think it's important. I think a lot of us, we are definitely impacted by these beauty ideals that are constantly, I don't want to say jammed down our throats,
Well,
but
foisted upon us anyway.
There you go. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
absolutely. I mean, the social media has done so much to put us in sort of a self-esteem crisis, especially younger people who don't have the wherewithal
Mhm.
and never lived without the internet. To tell them to not pay attention to it is very difficult. So we're in
Yeah.
a bit of a crisis here with and yet
also,
the extreme diet and exercise and all the physical stuff, augmentation that can happen now. It's happening more and more.
well, I also find it interesting that our generation, Gen X, the women of it, we're the first generation to kind of go into menopause having had the internet like kind of tell us what we're supposed to look like.
Oh yeah.
And
Right.
I find it really interesting that so many women of my generation, and I'll say like elder millennials too, are just kind of like, fuck right off with that.
Yeah, right.
Like the amount of anti-aging and like how to look younger and more attractive and for hetero men and blah 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 and how
Yeah.
to get thinner while we're all in menopause and trying to like just get through our day to day in this
Well, it's like
insane
that.
world.
I sent Nora a video yesterday from one of my favorite English comedy shows from a while ago called that Mitchell and Webb look. But it's a fake commercial, and in the
Mm,
beginning they have a
yep.
woman standing there, and it's like it goes through this whole litany of things that are wrong with her. Like she's bloated, she's got agony gut, she's wrinkly, she's tired, her kids' clothes are a mess, and then
Yeah.
they end it by giving her some drug, and she's like, yeah, so I can live my way,
No, no,
which is hilarious.
no.
Yeah,
You know what they
yeah.
do is they
Oh,
give her all these products
all
selling
right,
to
all the
her to
products
get
that'll
rid of it.
help
So
her,
she's
right?
got this
Yeah,
enormous
yeah,
shopping bag
yeah,
she's dragging around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then for the guys,
Yeah, and then she's like, I can live my life with freedom now, and she's
yeah,
dragging this giant thing around. And then it cuts to a guy, and it's like, men, shave and have a beer because you're already brilliant. And that's
that's
basically
essentially our society in a nutshell.
that's our society in a nutshell.
Yeah,
It
go
is
on
and it
with your
isn't.
dad bod.
Well, we're gonna talk about men's beauty standards too here. I'm
Yeah,
here to represent that part of it because
because
there's a
that is
serious
shifting.
crisis. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
shifting, and there's a serious crisis going on with that too. So we shouldn't make light of it of that, so much.
Hmm.
But it definitely is a tremendous amount of pressure on women to conform to what society tells them to look like all the time at every age. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'll start with giving like a little brief history, and it's not a
Please,
comprehensive
yeah.
history,
Let's
but
talk
like
about the
a
history
little
of it.
bit
Yeah.
brief history, just so we can. I'm doing this so we can see that a lot of these crazy beauty standards, we can kind of see where they're rooted,
Yeah.
and that way people can think more critically about the decisions that they make about their appearance, what they put in their body, how they treat their body.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's your choice, your body, your choice, but it's just a way to I don't know, like inform people and get them to see a little clearer where all these things are rooted.
Well, I think context is always key when
Yeah,
it comes to any decision you're going to make, right? And any history just gives us more context, even though we're not
yeah.
so great at history in this country.
No, we're not.
But
Clearly.
but hit us with the history, Nora,
All
because I'm
right. Well,
interested
and
too.
it's
Yeah,
gonna jump around, and it's not again, like I said, it's not a comprehensive one, but it's kind
yeah,
of
go
some
for it.
stuff to paint a little picture. But
Yeah.
we'll start with the ancient Greeks, which is pretty interesting because the ancient Greeks actually worship the male form,
Hmm.
and they actually viewed women as like I think it was like disfigured men. So we can
Mm.
see the misogyny starts early. um, so the kind of ideal beauty standard for women of that era was light skin, a fuller
Mm.
body, and plumpness, and that
Yeah.
was essentially that was to distinguish that these women were from an elite class that had access to food.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the picture I'm going to paint with this historic kind of like rundown, very abbreviated one, is to show how a lot of the beauty ideals are set by the elite classes to
Mm.
distinguish themselves from the lower classes or the subordinate classes
Hmm.
and how rooted that is. So again, the plump light-skinned women of ancient Greece, that was like to signify that they had enough wealth to eat, that they had access to food. So we'll move forward to like the Italian Renaissance era, and you can see in the art there the like I guess the like Rubenesque forms, like the
Hmm.
so the ideal was like for the women's body was like a rounded stomach and wide hips, fair skin, big boobs,
Big booty. Yeah.
big yeah, and it indicated wealth again,
Well
it was
fed. Yeah.
yeah, and the
Healthy.
at that time, the quote unquote duty, the beauty duty, as I like to call it, for women of that era was to reflect their husband's status
Mm. Hmm.
through their behavior, but also their appearance. And so
Hmm.
it was like, again, it was a signifier of like who was wealthy and elite and, didn't have
Class.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a guy named Pierre Bourdieu. I
Hmm.
might be butchering his name there, but he's a French sociologist. And in specifically, he studied the sociology of aesthetics, which is like,
Mm. Hmm.
I didn't even know that was a thing, but apparently, and he supports a theory that the elite classes are constantly working to differentiate themselves. So this is like actually studied,
Mm-hmm.
and he achieved wide influence in this specific field. So he's like a key guy in like basically putting like these pieces together about like how the elite classes often will distinct they'll differentiate themselves by cultivating like tastes, diets, and physical appearances that are in
Mm-hmm.
opposition to the subordinate classes, the lower classes, the working classes. And that's how like the social hierarchies are kind of normalized in our
Mm.
cultures.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And that's also how those standards get flipped sometimes, right? Because
mhm,
when the lower classes start catching on to what the
getting
upper
access.
classes are doing, getting access
Mhm,
to it, cheaper goods or whatever, but mimicking the upper classes,
yep.
then the upper classes will switch. And this is why we get the body type switching too, right? From
Well,
Rubenesque to skinny and all that,
yep.
right?
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting you say this because if we go to like England, Elizabethan England,
Hmm.
Elizabeth the First, she apparently had like quite a hankering for the sweets.
Hmm. Yeah.
So at that time, the sugar was a costly import, so
Hmm.
only like the elite classes had access to sugar, and so she was just like apparently like downing the sugar paste stuff. She just really loved it,
Hmm.
and so much that her teeth were rotting out.
Mm.
And instead of that being like a oof, maybe you need a little help there, the fact that she was a wealthy elite class woman who had access to the sugar meant that women of the lower class were started resorting to kind of look like her, to putting makeup on their teeth to blacken them out.
Mm. Black in their teeth. Yeah.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
can see how this, but and here's like where we start to see like a jump. Um, it was the transatlantic slave trade that was going on, at least in this context. I'll give it like when I was just talking about Elizabethan England.
Hmm.
So when you had the transatlantic slave trade, sugar became widely available. And so that, in England, smaller towns outside of the society could access it. And so as more and more people were able to, classes were able to access sugar, it became like passe by the elite.
Hmm.
Like it was
Hmm.
like, oh, we're done with
Well,
sugar.
they can all have pie. We don't want our pie anymore. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, um, and at this time, at least with the English people, they started to engage and like be. They used to engage. They were engaging more with the enslaved Africans and their body types,
Hmm.
and more specifically with the women, the African women, and the there was like a whole within this elite hierarchy. Um, there was a kind of like a it basically they started to see like blackness in black women and the enslaved Africans that they encountered as like unattractive, and like
Mm.
you can see where the roots of like degrading black
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
and became. And so
Yeah.
because of like this class system that they're in, the degradation of black women and their bodies really started. So that's where the shift towards thinner, disciplined white
Mm.
women came
Mm.
around where in those classes. So
Hmm.
it's pretty gross,
Yeah.
very gross. But this is like kind of the roots of these kind of beauty standard ideals.
Hmm.
So I want people to really understand this so that they can make better informed choices and really think about what they are doing to their bodies or who's selling what
Yeah.
for them to look a certain way.
Right.
Um, anyway, that's also around like the corsets were around then. This is like, getting into the thinness ideal, but it was around this time that like the uh, the corsets became like really tight waisted, like the kind
Hmm.
where it's like if you take the corset off, you're gonna like your ribs are gonna collapse kind of
Right.
stuff because
Yeah. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
going for like the thinness, and this is where diets like use a tapeworm to get
Hmm.
thinner, or like drink arsenic poisoning and like
Or just
all
stuff
these
that does all these quack medicines that just didn't do anything. They're
100%.
partially cocaine and partially, whatever other items are
Right.
in there, that kind of thing at the
But
time. Yeah.
this is where you
Snake
could
oil.
see that like thinness, restraint, and discipline became the indicators of wealth for
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
white
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, I just want to get that. Do you want to add anything to this at all? Or?
No, no, not at all. I mean, it's, yeah, as we say, it's not a comprehensive history of everything,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm more familiar probably with the 20th century sort of beginning of public relations and advertising part of
Mhm.
it, where instead of instead of sort of mimicking the upper classes, it becomes aspirational to become the upper classes, which is a little
Mhm.
bit different, I think.
Yeah.
Instead of everybody going, oh well, the queen has black teeth, I'm going to try out some black teeth. This is like, oh, you can be the queen, if you only do this kind of thing,
Right.
right? And that's when that advertising really starts to get their hooks into the aspirational nature of our ego,
Mhm. Mhm.
and changes and can change fashions now on a dime, right? I mean, we're changing things all the time. We're looking forward and we're looking backwards and we're looking in the moment, but it's just like fast fashion is just fast fashion. It keeps changing year by year,
Right. Right.
where it used to be, at least trends would last longer than that,
Right.
when we were young.
Well, this is where I'm like the whole idea that all of the Western beauty standard, the Western beauty ideal is really rooted in capitalism,
Yes.
in racism, and
Yeah.
in patriarchal structures, right?
Yeah.
And so like that holds true to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but a lot of people think that like when they think about the history of this, they go back to like the Hollywood golden era, and I
Hmm.
just want to say that it's like this has existed long before
Well,
that, Way
long before. Yeah.
but we'll get it like I know you were talking about vaudeville and how the
Yeah.
beauty standard then. I don't know if you
Yeah.
wanna
Well,
explain a little bit.
it started. Gibson girls had a certain standard to them. They looked a certain way, like the illustrations of Alphonse Mucha. If you go back and look at those, he did a lot of women of that era of the late 1800s. Certainly, there was a look to that with the bustle and the big hairdo and everything. That was a beauty ideal.
Mhm.
And then when vaudeville came in, like when you start to get motion pictures, I think that's when we're talking about sort of a mass hypnosis toward beauty ideals, because
Mhm.
these are the first things, the first media that's distributed all over the
It's
country,
traveling,
in terms
right. Mhm.
it's traveling, right? I mean, a vaudeville show you might see, and certainly there were vaudeville stars that you might emulate their style or something like that. But when you start to see, I don't know who's a good example, the silent film star like Rudolph Valentino or somebody like that. It's an exotic person you've never seen before, and the reason that the term tall, dark, and handsome was coined to begin with, right?
Mm.
So you get people who maybe aren't of your culture, right? Valentino's an Italian. He's got a darker olive complexion. He's got darker skin, darker hair, and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, the ideal becomes something we never even thought of before, right? Because
Right.
Valentino's hugely popular with the ladies, obviously, because he's a handsome dude and he's tall, dark, and handsome, right? So
Mhm.
anyway, so we start to get this sort of mass hypnosis into beauty ideals when film comes around, I think,
Right.
and then
Right.
certainly television and the internet later.
Well, yeah, and that's you can see in the marketing too, like, as the beauty ideal, at least for women, and
Yeah.
in history, has like it changes up because once you sell an idea and an ideal to women to aspire to look a certain way, you need to keep capitalism going. So you need to
Right.
switch that up every
Yeah.
10, 20 years and get them chasing a new, the goalpost and gets moved and
But
like.
you can keep the message the same. So, like
Mhm.
in the 1950s and 60s, if you go back and you look at especially print advertisements, but TV too, but print advertisements, how many of them are there that are like, "Do this for your husband," right? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
everything was geared toward "Do this for your husband," right? So there's like tons of terribly misogynistic advertisements where the woman is like. The man is holding the woman over his knee and
Yeah,
spanking her
spanking
because she
her,
made
all that.
bad coffee or some shit like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous, right? So then, and that goes into beauty standards too. It's like you're doing this for him. You're looking, and again, it goes back to the historical one that you were
Yep.
talking about. You're supposed to reflect the
Your
status
husband's
of your
status.
partner, right?
Mhm.
Your husband's status all the
Don't
time.
embarrass him.
Right. Don't embarrass your husband. It's all
Mhm.
about him and his status. Nothing about you as an individual. It's all about you giving up your individuality to be in service to this greater sort of ideal, if you will, that
Well,
the advertisers want you to conform to.
we can see the push towards that still,
Oh yeah. Oh
like,
no,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
so
It's today. Yeah, for sure. This isn't
yeah.
just the 1950s or the 1800s. This
Well,
is
the
just
other is,
certainly
like,
that's today.
you can take it out of even the beauty standard and put it towards, like, what car you drive or
Oh
where
yeah.
neighborhood you live and
Yep.
all this other stuff of just, like,
Status.
status to
Status.
signify,
Yeah.
how much jewelry you wear and, like, to show the status, and it's interesting to me and, I get my nails done sometimes, like,
Hmm.
I know people who love to
As
have
do
their
I.
nails. There
Yeah.
you go. Hey, there you go. Um, but so much of that is rooted in I have really manicured nails because I don't work in manual labor.
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
like it's
That
another
not you,
signifier.
Nora, but that was the
Well, that's
standard is what
also
you're
true.
talking about. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I can't really get a manicure when I'm working in plants, but
Yeah. Right.
or like,
Exactly. Exactly.
in a
But no,
kitchen,
that comes from China, I think. The long nail thing originally is
Mhm.
that was a signifier that you didn't do any manual labor if you had long nails, so you were higher status. So that
Right,
on Chinese men especially. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that that's like everyone's intention with it, but again, these are the roots of these things of showing like the 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 elite status
Yeah.
of people, the roots of it.
Yeah.
Um, you were saying something about the Hollywood era, and I just wanted to touch on like there were like the flapper girls who were like thinner, and that were
Hmm.
kind of became like an ideal standard. And then we had a push towards a little more curvy women in like 40s and 50s, and then the 60s came around and Twiggy became like.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if you don't know who Twiggy was, or I don't know if she's still alive or not.
She's still alive. Twiggy's
Is
still
she
alive.
still alive?
Yeah. She was a
Twiggy,
judge. She was a judge on America's Top Model for a number of years. I think
there
she's
you
still
go.
alive. Yeah.
Again, Twiggy was a model in the mod era of the 60s who was very thin. And, we can see these standards shifting, and, like, I just remember being in high school in the 90s and how Kate Moss and the Heroin Chic, the Double
Hmm.
Zero, kind of extremely thin
Yeah.
kind of ideal took root, and just how insane that was, and how many women I knew that had eating disorders trying to just starve themselves into this beauty standard.
Yeah.
Um, but when, came around like the 2010, I guess, is when like the kind of Kardashian empire kind of took root. And we can see
Hmm.
with the Kardashians, they really propelled the hourglass figure, the flat stomach with like a big boobs and a big butt,
Hmm.
but
Yes.
also a thigh gap. So it had to be curvy but thin,
Yeah.
and tan but still white.
Yeah.
And kind of selling, co-opting and building an entire empire on selling this, molding this image, including like diet teas or detox teas, and
Hmm.
and you can see the rise of like Brazilian butt lifts. I think I read a statistic that I think it was Cosmopolitan, which I don't know how
Yeah.
how legit this
Next
research
to the
is.
New York Times is my second go-to for news of the
No,
day.
but
Yeah.
like a magazine that really just like
Yes.
has
Yeah.
force fed this.
Yeah.
Apparently, Brazilian butt lifts, that it's a very apparently it's a very dangerous cosmetic
Is
procedure.
it? Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
it's like apparently a very the Brazilian butt lifts, the surgeries increased from by 90% from 2015 to 2019.
Wow.
Isn't I
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
so there are all these surgeries you can see with like, all sorts of enhancements you can do that
Hmm.
to every part of your body, like especially for women. You want hair extensions, you want your brows done, your lashes, you can get like a
Right.
facelift, Botox,
Yeah.
lip fillers. You can go all the way down your body. You can
Microblading,
spend
all that
money
stuff.
for
Yeah.
all of it,
Yeah.
like, for all of it, like, and now we've got, you know, Ozempic, which
Yeah.
is basically taking the same route that Botox did, which were initially, pharmaceuticals to help people with specific medical issues that also had aesthetic, um
Side effects.
exactly.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the pharmaceuticals are now, like, pushing so that doctors can get a cut of that, and then, like, we're now like, "Okay, you can inject your way to the thinness," and, it's
Yeah.
just it's out of hand.
It is out
It's
of
out of
hand.
hand.
It is out of hand. And it's
Um,
but I want to shift into a little bit about how do we, because I'm not we don't want to we certainly don't want to make it like anybody is wrong for following beauty
no.
standards, because
Mhm,
it's extremely difficult to get out of, especially for young people. If you're fed this stuff on TikTok all day long or Instagram all day long, or these idealized beauty standards, and all your friends are following them, it's extremely difficult to turn away from that and
mhm.
go, okay, I'm not going to follow these things. I don't believe in them,
Right.
when there's so much pressure to conform.
Yep.
But so, it's tough. I just want to make sure that none of our listeners thinks that we're in any way looking down upon people
No, there's no
who do follow
judgment.
these beauty
You do
standards.
you.
It's just, I think we just wanted to encourage people to think more about choices like that, and think if it's truly making you happy to dress the way you do and look the way you do, or if it might be performative, and
Mhm.
and the latter is not as healthy as the former.
Well,
You know?
also, we judge women so harshly, and this includes other women, so
Hmm.
harshly on appearance.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we have a president who judges women on their appearance and has said disgusting things about women and,
Yes.
about their value being attached to how they relate to men, right?
Yeah.
And I also just want to point out these things so that we are less is reticent the word I'm looking for to judge other people by their appearance and their bodies and their like whether they look their age and like, telling people that they look younger than they are is supposed to be this massive compliment. Why?
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is youth is eternal youth the objective here? Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been told it is, right? I mean,
Right.
a lot of this, I think, goes back to our terrible attitude that we have toward death in this country. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
question about it, right?
Yep.
Because everything we do beauty wise is just trying to avoid the eventuality of death, right? I
Yep.
mean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but we're all running away from
But
the
also
void, right? Yeah.
you're never gonna avoid it.
No, no, you're not. But I mean, we as Americans go through life with the illusion that we are somehow going to avoid it. Like something
Mhm.
will be invented where we're going to live to 200 before we die. Yeah, probably not.
No
Probably
thanks.
that's probably not going to happen. And no thanks. I don't want another
No
100 years
thanks.
on the planet. No,
Good
thank you. No,
lord.
I'll
Oof.
pass on that one. Thanks. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for every day that I'm here, but I don't need it to go on forever. I don't
No.
need to be the vampire Lestat. Thank you very much. It's just like sounds nightmarish to me. I'm good. So yeah. So anyway, let's talk about the men's beauty standards just a little bit, can we?
Yeah, please, let's do that because that is
Yeah,
shifting in a way that I'm
it
not
is
really so
shifting.
happy about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It is shifting and has been shifting for some time. So I think the main thing with men's beauty standards is going to be workout culture, right?
Mhm.
There's some
The
other
gym.
stuff like hair loss and ED
Height.
and stuff like that. Height,
Yeah.
that it's things that and height you can't do anything about, but it certainly is a standard that you get set against. When you're a man. But the workout culture, it really since the advent, we started to see these hyper unrealistic bodies in superhero movies and magazine
Mhm.
spreads that are airbrushed and CGI'd, and a lot of people. I watched a video yesterday about the preparation to get one of those Marvel guys on screen. I can't remember what it was,
How
but so
dehydrated did they need to
well,
get?
he had dehydrated for 3 days before the shoot, right? So no water for 3
Oh
days.
my
And then
gosh.
yeah, exactly. And then an extreme workout routine that had been going on for 6 months, where they only ate chicken and broccoli every day, like 5 times a day. That's what they ate. And then and then when they got on set, the body still wasn't good enough. So they did a whole airbrush routine around the
Oh my
abs and around
gosh.
the chest, right? So when you see Henry Cavill like walk out there like he just got out of bed with his shirt off, no, he's had 2 hours in makeup, 6 months of training, and an extremely unhealthy diet and exercise routine to get there. And as soon as he gets done with that movie, he's going to stop doing that. And he's going to go
It's not
back to waffles
sustainable.
and everything. It's
Exactly,
not
right?
sustainable. It's not
Nope,
supposed to be. They do that because it's their job,
and it
right?
sells.
Yeah, and your job it's impossible for your job to be to stay in that shape for 365 days a year. I mean, you can do it, but it's not going to be healthy for your body. And yeah, so I think men have started to, certainly in male culture, it's like, do you even lift, bro? That kind of
Yeah.
thing. There's a lot of that going on. You have to be triangular, you have to have a six pack, you have to have a wider chest and shoulders than you have a waist. It's just
Mhm.
it gets put on you.
Yeah.
And that's
Although I will
really
say there's a lot more grace for men, although that is changing in a way that I don't really love, like you said, with,
yeah,
like, endangering men's health and, like,
yeah,
making
yeah,
the standard be ultra ripped.
yeah.
Um, there's also the, like, whole, like, "Look at the dad bod. Look how cute,"
Yeah,
like, that
no,
thing,
for
right?
sure. And I will add, I mean, we do it to ourselves. I mean, we
Yeah,
follow these standards that they put on the screen. I'm not saying that women are like, men must have a six pack, because most women, I think, like a regular dude, for the
yeah.
most part, because
Mhm.
who wants to be a gym widow? That's the
Ugh.
other thing, right? Who wants to
I've
sit
never heard
around the
that
house?
term.
Well, I mean, it's
It's
true.
true. No, I like
Who
the
wants to
term.
sit around the house while your partner goes and does 6 hours of airobix and weightlifting,
Also,
and
who
then
wants to eat just baked chicken and broccoli every
right,
meal? Good
exactly,
lord.
exactly, right? It's like,
Give me some
okay,
cake, man.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want a brownie. I'm gonna eat a brownie.
So
Yeah,
if you're a movie star and you do it for a little while, okay, I guess it's your choice to do that kind of thing. But for regular people, it's not a sustainable ideal that people are putting out there, and it's not healthy. It's not
yeah.
healthy at all. You look at any video that asks some Marvel star about their workout routine, they'll all say how hard it was. they'll all say how they probably got sick after the movie, and then they'll all say how they went back to carbs right after because it was such torture to be in that for 6
Right.
months, right? I mean,
Right.
so, you know, not a realistic thing.
Right. I'll say this too, and this is just my own personal experience, but it's interesting to look back on. When I went, for anyone who's a new listener, I had ovarian cancer in 2015. I
Mm,
went through massive surgery and then went through aggressive chemotherapy for several months, and also was put on massive steroids in order to counteract all the terrible things that chemo does.
mm,
So, like I had such rapid change in my appearance and so
mm.
quickly, it's really kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was going through this, like the first month that they put me on steroids and chemo, I gained 40 pounds in like a month.
Wow.
And so there's that. And then all my hair fell out, and my
Mhm,
eyelashes fell out, my eyebrows, all the hair on my body fell out. And I got like what they call moon face, which was like from the steroids, and like my
mhm.
skin was gray from the chemo. It was a hot mess. My nails fell off. It's just like your body just is like deteriorating. Do you remember like that
In front of
scene?
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that scene from like Indiana Jones back in the
I was
day
gonna
where
say
the
the
guy
guy melting. Yes,
that's
that
what it
was
feels
like
like, right? You're like, "Oof." But, like, also, like, I also have to live my life and, like, go out grocery shopping and, like,
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
all that stuff well. And I didn't really have time or I didn't do the wig thing. And I get why people do it. I 100% get why a lot of people, especially women, opt for the wig when they're going through
Yeah.
chemotherapy. Because as a woman, and in particular, I've seen black women go out with, like, shaved heads looking awesome, and,
I
but
love
you
a
don't
shaved head.
often s yeah, you don't
Yeah.
often see that with women,
Mhm.
with white women,
Yeah.
sorry, white women, unless you're Sinead O'Connor, but,
Yeah.
I was my head wasn't even shaved at that point, it was just bald,
Mhm.
um, but I looked like ET when he was really sick. So, you know, um,
Elliot.
yeah.
Elliot.
Phone home. So but when I would go out, I would kind of forget that I look like that because, again, in my head, my
Right.
appearance was different. It was so rapid change. But I would just go out, and the response from other people, and in particular from, like, other women sometimes was really interesting,
Mm.
where I got, like I just still remember walking through the grocery store, and there was, like, a woman with, like, her teenage daughter, and they passed by me, and the woman who was, like and the daughter both looked at me like, "Ugh," right?
Yeah.
Like, thinking like I had just
Why
like, they
didn't she
didn't
dress up for
approve.
the store, right?
Well,
Yeah.
that they didn't approve of, like, me shaving my head, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Wow,
Right.
this is really interesting," but it's also this strange thing where people will come up to you and you're kind of like the projection of their worst fears or something
Yeah.
that like someone they lost to cancer, and it's jarring for people, I guess. Um, I did have a point to this. Hold on, give me 1 second. Oh, we're getting through, but, like, once I started to, get better and my hair started to grow back, I still had the weight on, I still do have the
Mhm.
weight on. My hair was, like, curly, crazy mess, but, like, I was less apparent as a sick person, and it became more people judging me by my like, not liking my quote unquote flawed appearance, and it's just such an interesting dynamic to for me at least to have kind of gone through these like crazy transitions so quickly and
Yeah.
seeing people's responses to it without them even understanding what they were responding to.
It's amazing the assumptions that people make about
Yeah.
appearance, right? I mean, you
Yep.
take this, there's this English supermodel, male supermodel named Ben James, and he's known
Mhm.
for being sort of a plus size model, which is ridiculous because he just looks like a regular dude. But,
Mhm.
yeah, but he's not as triangular as, the Marvel guys, and he's not as skinny as a lot of the other supermodels are. So
Mhm.
he's a what we would call back in the 70s a husky dude, right? That's about it. He's just, he's a little bit rectangular instead of triangular, good looking guy, everything like that. But he says, when he's out running, when he's at his biggest, when he's out running, people assume it's to lose weight, and it's not to lose weight. He's already a top athlete. It's just not
Mhm.
not a skinny one. Like, it's like when a shot putter is out running, he's not trying to lose weight. He's out there training his cardio so he can throw the shot put farther or whatever.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. But everybody assumes, oh, big guy gonna lose weight. Same.
I
Oh, that girl's got a shaved head. She must have done that to herself. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and also there's an interesting if you to kind of further understand what I'm talking about, what you're talking about. My friend Ellie She went by Ellie Mayday. Her real name was Ashley, but she was a model.
Hmm.
Ellie was a friend of mine, and she was also diagnosed with ovarian cancer when she was young, and she's passed away from it, unfortunately, several years ago, pre-pandemic. But she was a plus size model, and there's a documentary on her and other women, but it specifically kind of hones in on her story
Mm.
at the time where she kind of was a plus size model and then got invited to New York City by like a massive modeling company where she was really
Hmm.
all like trying to encourage body positivity and whatnot. And her dream was to like get into like an ad on Times Square. And it follows her journey because the day that they sent that email was when she was basically, I don't know if it was when she was diagnosed or she was going through chemotherapy. And so it was like, sucks for her because it's like her dream was manifesting in this era of when she was losing all her hair and
Yeah.
going through a massive health crisis
Mm.
that impacted her body and her looks.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, and she had such a great attitude through all this, and
Mm.
like she really to her, like I know like to the depths of her heart, really just wanted all women to feel beautiful
Mm.
no matter what
Mhm.
the world told them.
Yeah.
It's a great documentary. It's called A Perfect 14. If you want to watch it, you can
Okay.
look up the trailer on YouTube. I think you can stream it on a lot of the streaming platforms, including I don't know if it's on Hulu or what, but look out
Yeah.
for it. I highly recommend it. Ellie was awesome.
There is some thank you for that.
Mhm.
There is some great content out there in terms of body positivity. While you were talking, it reminded me, and I'm sorry, listeners, I don't know the name of this series, but it's a series in which I started watching a couple of years ago on YouTube, and I think it's put out by a magazine, if I'm not mistaken, probably a fashion magazine, but or it could be an independent project. Anyway, it has older women who are being interviewed, and every time they answer a question, they take off a piece of clothing, and they
Yeah,
end
that's
up sort
so
of in
Ellie
a
was in that. It's
oh,
called
she
Style
was.
Like You. Mhm.
Style Like You. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
So
Yes,
Ellie
yes,
was
yes,
in one
yes.
of them where
Great.
she talks about so look up Ellie Mayday, Style Like
Uh-huh.
You on YouTube, and
Yeah.
you can see her talk about this. She was just I really miss her.
Oh, man. And there are some other great women. All the women that I watched in that series were
There are like
absolutely
breast
great,
cancer survivors.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
from like,
octogenarians,
yep.
like all kind.
Mhm.
People have lived a long time. People are disabled. People with diseases.
Mhm.
People, all kinds of stuff in there. The whole gamut. And it's just like it's a real
It's showing
truthy,
beauty
truthy
comes from
document.
within, and that was
Exactly.
Ellie's thing. It was like, your beauty really comes from within, and like that was like her message throughout her diagnosis. Like she was diagnosed and then she went into remission and then had a recurrence, and like basically that's the thing with ovarian cancer. Most cases it comes back and then
Right.
it's like again and again and again until most women pass from it after
Yeah.
many very hard difficult years. But her
Yeah.
Style Like You was basically trying to put out her message wherever she could, is that like real beauty is comes from within and has
Yeah.
nothing to do with anything external.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, on that topic, what do you I want to ask you, Nora, like how do you relate to beauty standards now personally, now that the age that you are? You're younger than I am, and I'll tell you how I relate to them after that. But how do you relate to them? Do you still feel the pressure? Are you over it
It's
at your age? Like
interesting.
how does it work
It's
on you?
interesting. I'm at the age now where I'm in the, like, my quote unquote "invisible years,"
Yeah.
right? And I think for a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, it's interesting to, you feel like you can operate through the world and maneuver through the world at this age as a woman with a lot more freedom,
Mhm.
because there's far less attention on you and your
Yeah.
appearance. It's all about the, like, 20-year-olds, the teenage girls.
Yeah.
And quite honestly too is like, I'm not the standard of women. Like I don't have the same kind of trajectory as many women my age going into menopause
Mhm.
because of my cancer diagnosis and because of the surgery I had to go through. I went into surgical menopause in my 30s.
Mhm.
And so I know a lot of women now my age they're in perimenopause, or they're like, they're going through menopausal changes and the changes in your body from that. And so there's more talk about that in my circles. Um, but it's like a lot of the I happen to hang out with a lot of women that kind of are trying to embrace aging and like look
Hmm.
at what they
Hmm.
can do and focus on strength and what your body and agility and what your body can do and longevity
Yeah.
rather than aesthetics. But that does exist. It's
Hmm.
like the Botox and the Ozempic and the all the things to make you look younger and quite honestly read between the lines like more fuckable.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Right.
Right?
Exactly.
I just kind of am like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Like I like feeling good about myself. Like I go to the gym to get stronger because like I'm in a position where I need to worry about whether I'm going to get osteoporosis from going through chemo and like
Yeah.
trying to like basically facilitate aging in a way that like, for longevity and ability. So I focus on that, not on like how thin I am or, how my butt looks.
Right.
Yeah, it's that just gets it's a chasing that is tired to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I mean, there's a certain invisibility about middle age for both sexes. I think it's worse
Mhm,
for women, but I certainly am more invisible than I used to be to younger people. I notice that all the time when I'm
mhm.
around, which is great. It means I can shoplift anytime I want. It's fantastic. Got so much stuff now. It's great. No, but seriously, yeah, you do become more invisible. Certainly as a woman. My ex certainly talked about that a lot. How
Mhm,
when we were together, everybody talks to me. Everybody
mhm.
like she's just you know
Yeah.
it's just a hierarchical. In aging. It was just a very weird situation.
Yeah,
That
it's
happened all
strange
the time. But
too. It's strange because, like, internally, I don't feel like I'm aging, but then, like, externally, I'll see photos of myself and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I'm aging."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's okay, and the thing is, aging's a privilege. I truly believe that,
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
you know, eh, the whole idea the thing is you're gonna lose abilities
Yeah,
as you get older.
yeah.
That's a fact. You're not gonna be able to do all the things, all the time. You're just gonna lose your abilities.
Yeah.
So you have to really focus on what you can do and what you do feel good about in yourself.
100%, 100%. I'm really trying to embrace aging 100% as I go through this process, and
Mhm,
I'm sort of reveling in it because I'm at a point. I think this might be important for other people to hear too. I'm at a point where I've really learned to love myself in my
mhm.
50s, and that's a long time. I wish I could have learned to love myself sooner than that, but really like make friends with myself,
Yeah.
and that has lessened the pressure of society's opinion so much because I like who I am, and I like, I'll dress the way I want to dress, and that's fine. I haven't given up on that stuff, but the only reason that I sometimes dress in a fancier than I am now, is because it makes me feel good. I like it.
Mhm,
I like to do it. It doesn't have anything to do with society standards. Certainly, the stuff I wear when I'm quote unquote dressed up isn't anything you're going to see in a magazine now anyway. So,
mhm,
I've embraced my own style, and I don't really care what's coming down the runway anymore. Whereas I used to be way more conscious, certainly about my body. I always hated my body from like age, five, because I was a bigger kid, right? I had a lot
mhm,
more weight when I was a kid, so I got made fun of that I was fat all the time. They called me over a ton instead of Overton in junior high and grammar school. So that stuck with me for an awful long time, and I didn't learn to love my body. I went through a period of extreme exercise in my
mhm.
30s, and I was in the best shape of my life, and exhausted and sick and hurting myself and all that stuff because I was
Mhm.
on this extreme,
Were
this
you doing
extreme
that for
course.
aesthetic purposes, or were
I
you,
was
like, just
doing it for dance purposes, but also for
Mhm,
aesthetic purposes. I wanted to be stronger, but I also wanted to have a six pack, which I had never had before. And I
mhm,
achieved those things. I was stronger and had a six pack, and I was miserable, and I was not eating, as much as I should have probably. And, it was a lot of guys, I was going to say there's an NHS study that was done. And between 2010 and 2017, the incidence of eating disorders for men increased by 70%.
Jesus.
And I believe that
It's not
because,
okay.
I was on the edge of sort of that eating disorder thing. It didn't feel like it because I
Mhm,
wasn't binging and purging or anything like that, but I was definitely doing that sort of Marvel hero diet, right?
Right.
And definitely dehydrating myself to, like, not for 3 days, but maybe for a day, I wouldn't drink water, something like that, if I knew I was going to have my shirt off, or, those kind of
Hmm.
things. So just ridiculous type of stuff like that. And I don't believe any of that stuff anymore. And I'm really glad that I don't care as much as I used to about,
Well, it's also we
aesthetic
don't have
appearance,
the
et cetera.
energy at this
Right.
point for that stuff
Right. I don't
either,
have the
right? Like,
energy. I mean, this is all I can do to do my push-ups and crunches every day. Other than
yeah,
that, I'm lucky if I can, I need a nap after that, but there you go.
yeah, I get that, and like where I am at this point in my life, my I have arthritis, like my joints are stiffer, like it takes a lot more maintenance just to like be more mobile at
Right.
this
Yeah,
where I am in my life right now than when I was, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
for sure.
Um, and yeah, I hear that, you know, I've always been I grew up like athletic. So I've always been like but it wasn't the cute athletic stuff for girls. It was like I played basketball, competitively for many, many years and, I didn't get into dance until like my like 20,
Yeah.
which was swing
Yeah.
dancing and the
Right.
reason I liked it was because I was
It
like
was athletic.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
saw,
Yeah.
footage of, like, Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, and the women were, like, freaking just so powerful,
Yeah,
and,
very
like,
muscular. Yeah.
like but just, like, their movement was powerful,
Mhm.
not even
Yeah.
just, like, their bodies, but they were just so powerful, and I was like, "Oh, I can do that." It wasn't the, like, ballet aesthetic of, like, super thin and very controlled. I
Yeah.
mean, Lindy Hop, they're very controlled, but it's like, the aesthetic of the dance is that it looks out of control even though it's
Mhm.
extremely controlled.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to me, but, so I was like I started, diving into dances that were more like had more power,
Mhm.
than it was about, like, dainty aesthetics in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's strange though, like, I definitely think the aging process can be a bit of a head trip, especially, at my age and, like, being a woman because it's weird to I feel like society, like, really is, like, tells women that, like, "Dude, to be, to be validated and whatnot, you should become a mom," and then, like,
Mhm.
people become moms, and then the moms are just, like, discarded and, like,
Mhm.
left to be
Mhm.
invisible
Yeah.
in the background, which is very wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mixed messages going on, aren't there, with that type of
Yes.
stuff? And we were on gender. You mentioned something about gender a second ago, and I just want to talk about one more thing about the male beauty standards, and that is the problem of heterosexual self presentation and how important that
Mhm.
is to
Yep.
most men, because anything that deviates from that is falsely
It's feminine,
characterized. Yeah, yeah,
and we
falsely
know how the
characterized
society feels
and
about feminine.
that's right. Falsely
Yep.
characterized and negatively associated as homosexual by other men, right? So you have to be, there's a certain amount of risk to going outside of the tribe, and it's not just like something else that you're trying to wear, and then it can mean ostracization from the group, right?
Mm,
So you have to be, I don't know. I mean, it's very pushed that you must appear heterosexual no matter what,
mm.
and like any deviance from that. But that's changing with Asian cultures certainly, and it's hit these shores too. So if you look at who Gen Z's heroes are, like Timothy Chalamet and like Harry Styles and people like that, they're certainly changing that
That's
in
great.
terms of the stuff that they're wearing to the Met Gala and to on the runway and in their
Yep.
videos and things like that. So they're definitely bending that toward more androgyny, which I welcome.
Yeah.
And certainly you see that among celebrities too. There's a lot more androgyny going on now.
Yeah.
Well, it's back. I'll say. I
Yeah,
mean,
right?
it wasn't. It's not like
Exactly.
it's anything new. It's back.
Man, we had
Um,
Bowie, we had,
right.
Annie
You know.
Lennox, we had all we
Yeah.
had
But
plenty of people.
certainly the dark side to that though too is like in Asia, with the K-pop phenomenon in South
Mm,
Korea, right? These kids, I was watching a video yesterday where these kids are groomed to be in these bands, and they have before shots of these kids, and they're just kind of doughy teenagers. Some of them
mhm,
are overweight, some of them are not that. they're not that attractive in the
They're not the
K-pop.
ideal,
They're
quote
not the
unquote.
ideal K-pop, star. So
Mhm.
they take these kids, they give them plastic surgery on their
Ugh.
faces. They set them on a huge exercise routine, an incredibly harmful diet where they can eat two bricks of tofu a day. That's what one kid said. Another kid had said he ate this like Korean jelly for a week, and that's all he ate was like these cubes of jelly. It was all he was given, just so he could basically keep going. And they end up passing out, when they're on stage and stuff and needing oxygen. I mean, no wonder they're put through this entirely, unrealistic thing. And then
Jeez.
all these boys across South Korea are also trying to look like these K-pop stars by doing this extreme stuff, and it's not healthy.
Like I said, it's rooted in
It's
capitalism.
rooted in
Pure
capitalism,
commodity, right? Like,
Yeah.
next, right? Like,
In
that's
another, in another part of Asia, Bollywood is the same way in a
oh,
lot of
yeah.
ways. Except this has to do with not only body type, but skin as well, right? If you look
Mhm.
at Bollywood movies, the majority of the heroes are light skinned, the majority of the villains are dark skinned, and the hero is always 100% ripped. Now, does that look like most of the Indian population? No, it does not look like most of the
Mhm.
Indian population. So you've got this explosion. This happens in Africa too, and a lot of Mexico as well. Because
Mhm.
I was in Mexico for a little while, and you turn on the TV in Mexico, and all the presenters on the news shows and the game shows and all that stuff, they're all blonde and they all look white, right? And so it's like it's this Euro preference,
Yeah.
away from your culture that is like poisons all these different cultures. So the skin whitening stuff is out of control. Like in Africa, especially, the sales of skin whiteners is sky high all the
Mhm.
time, just to get a couple shades lighter, so they can move up to basically move up the ladder of status by
Right.
the skin tone that's supposed to be ideal now, which is ridiculous.
Well, and, touching on that is like, for a lot of Black people in particular, I mean, I think in Malcolm X, the book, he talks about, like, conking his hair
Oh
and,
yeah,
like,
conking his hair. Yeah, yep.
like, basically, like and, like, the perms and stuff for black textured hair,
Yeah.
is to straighten it to look more European, the Euro standard.
Meanwhile,
And
using terrible
it's
chemicals and
horrible
frying
for
your
you,
hair.
right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and this the thing is like, for so many of these people who have to feel that they have to go through this is because you have employers requiring that. Like, I encountered that in my own like, years ago in an office I worked in San Francisco. One of my coworkers, was a Black woman who the CEO, who was like, the white collar white guy, would, like, comment on, like, how he really liked her hair when she straightened it, and I was like,
uh-huh.
"Oh, boy."
Oh
Like,
boy.
without yeah, it just and we would go to lunch together and just have full conversations about how fucked up it is,
Mhm.
and just, pervasive it is. So, like, for a
Well, and
lot of
not just the workplace, but
yeah.
we talked yesterday too a little bit about schools requiring certain
Yeah.
things, like no natural hair or something like
So
that,
messed up.
or no, taking away these cultural markers that people have, basically stripping them to make them the same as everybody else. And when they walk in an institution, is
Right,
ridiculous.
and forcing a European standard, right?
Forcing a
Like
European standard, yeah, on
yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
messed up.
it's
I know.
yeah.
Again, like I said
Don't get me started on dress codes. I was a school
oh,
teacher,
yeah.
so dress codes drive me crazy.
I went
But
to Catholic schools my whole life, so that
yeah,
was,
there you
an
go.
issue. I just
Yeah,
everyone looks like a factory worker.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
You're in a uniform. So,
yeah,
but yeah, all these things again, like I said, where the roots are. I again, if you are choosing to do whatever you want with your body and your appearance, that is 100% up to you. I just again, we hope that you can listen to this and really understand and critically think about these things, um, about where it's rooted,
yeah,
right? And like
yeah.
what are you upholding by doing whatever it is, whatever the procedure is or whatever the makeup is.
Yeah, and for me, this goes on to optimization culture in general,
Mhm.
like, and I
Mhm.
think like Tim Ferriss and those guys and
Oh,
people
yeah.
like that, and the workout gurus and the guys with their microdosing, and the guys with their, whatever, amino acids they're pushing this week or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're doing that, fine. But listen, one of the things that Ben James says that I agree with, that is the model I was talking about before, is instead of if your social media feed is full of like influencers, fitness influencers, and optimization guys that are telling you how to hack your life
Mhm.
into little bits so it's more manageable, like stop following those guys, right? And stop making it about make it about function, not
Not about
about
Fitspo.
the form, not about Fitspo or anything
Yeah.
like that. So his advice was start following athletes and people who work
Mhm.
out for function, not people who work out for aesthetics, and you're going to have a lot more achievable goals because not every body is the same, right? And
Right.
it took me a long time to learn that about my own body. I mean,
Mhm.
when I was working out real heavy I guess I was 30 at the time is when I got really super fit at the time. And I kept getting really angry that my body would not turn into a triangle, but,
Oh,
but
Paul,
what
gotta
it
go
would have,
back and hug you,
what,
30-year-old Paul.
what it would have taken was, for me to bulk up a lot on the top and then keep the waist that I had. But really my body is naturally rectangular. Right.
Mhm.
And it looks
Mhm.
fine like that.
Same.
It's more of a,
Same.
yeah, yeah. It's more of a swimmer's thing when it's really
Mhm.
fit. It's not so much of a bodybuilder thing or not so much of a Marvel hero thing.
Right.
And once I realized that, it was kind of like when I realized I was just a tall guy and I couldn't dance like the small guys on the floor because it's a totally different
Same.
thing, right? Right. For you
Uh-huh.
too, right? I mean, there are certain things that you've got to deal with, right? It's like
Yeah, I'm
putting,
not getting tossed around into air steps on
right.
when I'm 5'9", and,
That's
and
not
yeah,
your thing, right? I'm not going to be ducking under women's legs on the dance floor because I'm
right.
6'2" or
Yeah.
whatever, whatever trick, that short guys could do. They could, and I was always amazed how short guys could spin, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, their center of gravity is closer to the floor. I was like, oh, right, duh, of course they could do it. It's easier. It's
Yep.
easier somehow. And for me, I got a lot to knock off balance. I got to work harder at it. So I'm just saying, it's like design when I think about an interior design. You're not gonna put a cottage core interior inside a modern condo
Mid-century
or
mod.
something like that,
Yeah.
right? It's like
If you do, please
you have
stop.
something, right? You have a basis for what you need to accomplish next,
Mhm.
right? Which is this is your body, this is how you look, right? And then I think a lot of it is just about learning to love, realizing that, but then learning to love it. You can't turn your body into Henry Cavill. I
Work
mean,
with
most
what
of
you
us
got.
can't do it. Work with what you got,
Mhm.
love what you got,
Yep.
and work on knowing yourself instead of like this is the other thing about optimization culture that drives me crazy is that everybody's saying going for this ideal, but what happens when you get there?
Yeah.
You still don't know yourself when you get there. If all you're working on is working out and eating this crazy diet or whatever to get this body,
Then what?
then what? You've spent
Mhm.
all your time doing that, but then what happens after that? I think a lot
To
of people,
sustain it in
yeah,
order to feel like you approve
right.
of yourself, like, yeah,
I
could
have a
be.
friend of mine who went on a big weight loss journey. He lost 290 pounds. He
Wow.
was 400 pounds and he lost 200. No. I'm sorry, 240 pounds. He was, yeah,
That's a
240 pounds.
that's
He
a
was
commitment.
400 pounds. And he had surgeries afterwards and stuff. And, we have talked about this before that, and I have things like this in my life too, where I'll set a goal and I'll be like, once I reach this, I'll be okay.
Mhm.
Right. And his thought process was like that too. Like once I reach this, everything will be fine once I'm skinny. And, at the end of those things, you're still there and you're still you. And
Yep.
if you don't like yourself for who you are, it doesn't matter how skinny you are or what kind of six pack you have.
Right.
Right. You have to learn to love what is, I think, and then work with that. So your body feels good and not just looks good, right?
Mhm.
I think feeling good, especially as you get older. I mean, there are days when I don't get enough sleep, Nora, I'm up in the middle of the night or whatever
Same.
for whatever reason. And then the next day is horrible. And you think, man, in my 20s, I could sleep for so long. And then you get that one day where you sleep for 7 hours, right? And I'm just
Mhm.
like, oh my God, I feel totally different.
Yep.
It's just like you start to
A
appreciate,
whole new world.
yeah, you start to appreciate feeling good so much more than everything else because every day you don't feel good now. You're going to have aches, you're going to have pains, you're going to have
Mhm.
whatever, dizziness, you're going to have all
You're
this.
not as spry.
No, it just creeps up on you, man. And it just happens. You can't get up out of a chair as fast as you used to, all these other things, right? But you work with what you got, love what is, work with what you got, and try to follow other people on social media and talk to other people and surround yourself with other people who are into that same kind of philosophy around it. And you can lessen the effects that all this chatter from the outside, I think, has on you all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's I'll say this, there are certain people who are conventionally, beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Like in that fit the Western beauty ideals.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of women I know that did kind of like fit in that like kind of those beauty ideals. For a long time when they were younger, they didn't realize how much was offered to them because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yes.
And so like it's hard for people who are not like, not seen as conventionally beautiful. They're
Mhm.
beautiful, but they're not seen as like the Western beauty ideal.
The
Um,
symmetry is what that
yeah,
has to deal with,
the
by the way.
symmetry,
So it's the
whatever,
symmetry.
right?
If you put faces from different cultures next to
Mhm.
each other, white Europeans are the closest to symmetrical.
Is, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's closest to a symmetrical face, and that's one reason it became the beauty standard is
Ah,
because basically as humans, not just as white humans, but as humans, we enjoy symmetry, right? And we think symmetry is beautiful in one way or another. And so I think that's one reason it bent toward the white
yeah,
Europeans.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, let's bring this in for a landing. What are
Yeah.
the things that I've again like what I want to reiterate is we're not sitting here trying to tell you to not conform to beauty ideals. We just want to give you a little bit of history and context of where these come from and what they're rooted in, so that you can make better decisions for yourself and about your body, about your appearance, so that you have like more power in that way.
Yeah.
How
I
about
mean,
you, Paul? Anything?
well, to guys, I would like to men especially, I would just like to say, about the gym standards. Do your research about what's healthy and what's not, and then follow that advice. I know it's very tempting to go the extreme exercise diet, even the steroid route. It's incredible how many men are on steroids to try to get bigger and things
Yeah.
like that, and because you're not satisfied with what you are. So my main advice or my want for most men is to work with what you have and not try to alter it so radically that then you have to maintenance that alteration for the rest of your
Hmm.
life. That's like that extreme, muscle building type of activity, and focus on function and not form for the most part.
Hmm.
Enjoy being healthy, not looking great. Because if you are healthy, you'll look good too, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're not triangular, but if you are healthy and you're exercising and
Yeah.
you're eating right and all that stuff, that's going to show in a lot of different ways. And then try to lessen the importance of your I'm not saying give up or anything like that, but lessen in your mind the importance of your outward
Yeah.
appearance and work on the inward, I think
Yeah,
is the
that's
main thing.
exactly like I would say strive for like inner health and inner beauty.
Yeah,
And
healthy
that's really
thoughts, beautiful thoughts about yourself. Make
yep,
friends with yourself if you possibly can, man. It's the best
yep,
thing I've ever done is learn how to love myself. And it
same.
it takes away so much pressure from me
Hmm.
because you're no longer living for what anybody else thinks. You're only you the only thing that matters is what you think about yourself.
Well, I also want to say, especially with like our ongoing, ever evolving or devolving beauty ideals, also recognize that this is a billion-dollar industry.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, there are plenty of people who will sell you the waist trainers and the detox teas and the all the stuff to basically extract
The
the
ab
money for you, and
cruncher, the hula
all
chair.
of
Did
it.
you ever see the hula chair? That was my
Yeah.
favorite one. The one you sit on,
No,
it
but I
just goes
mean
around and around like this. It's supposed to make your abs good. Ridiculous.
No, but it's a thing of like, we see people and celebrities building empires on selling to you this ideal that they create, and so that they can extract more money from you, and then,
Gwyneth
they
Paltrow. Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say Kardashians, but
Kardashians.
like
Yeah.
that industry generates wealth for the elite who perpetuate it.
Yep.
So see it for what it is, and just go in mindful of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely. Couldn't have
yeah.
said it better.
Yeah, like my friend Ellie Mayday said, beauty comes from within. And that I truly believe that.
Yeah. Go watch that. What's that series called again, Nora?
The documentary is called A Perfect 14.
And what's the series of the interviews that I mentioned
Oh,
before
a
called?
style like you.
Style
It's
Like You.
style like with the letter U. And
Yeah.
you can go on YouTube, look up Ellie Mayday style like you on YouTube and check out her what she has to say. She was amazing and vulnerable and really just not only conventionally beautiful, but just also a really beautiful person. So
Great.
um, that's a good way to remember her and her legacy.
Cool. Well, thanks for that,
Mhm.
Nora. I love you.
Yeah, I
Thanks
love
for
it
being
too,
with me
Paul.
today. Yeah, it was good.
Um,
Good ep. I'm happy
yeah.
with this ep for
Do you
sure.
love me in my cellulite?
Yeah.
Great.
100%. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love
Yes.
it too.
I don't have to worry about a butt lift because I don't have a butt, so it's fine.
You got a
It's
back
just
with a
like
crack in
a
it?
back. My friend Drew used to say that's not a butt, that's a hinge, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's
I love
exactly
it.
right. And I got flat buttitis, and I'm keeping it. I am keeping it.
Love
Sorry.
your flat butt.
Thank you.
All right,
All right,
peeps. We'll see you on the
peeps.
next
Yeah. Thanks,
episode.
listener. We'll see you next time, and bye
Freedom,
Bye.
freedom, freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.